Welcome to the Personality Politics Podcast, the podcast that looks beyond the headlines, party lines, and Westminster noise to get to know more about the people behind British politics. I'm Tom Lane, and in each episode I sit down with MPs from across the political spectrum for relaxed, honest conversations about life, personality, pressure, ambition, and everything in between. This isn't about point scoring or political debate, it's about understanding who these people really are when the cameras are off. And today I'm joined by Conservative MP Paul Holmes. Let's get into it. Welcome to the latest edition of the Personality Politics Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by current Conservative MP Paul Holmes. Paul, thank you very much for joining me.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I was just looking through your Instagram before going live, and I thought I'd start with a really difficult question. You opened the Netley 10K race this week, and I wondered if you're someone that does sort of 10Ks and running. Is that something that you do?
No, not at all. I used to run cross county at school, and I was very good at athletics. But I'm slightly older. I used to smoke, and I like a beer. So no, 10Ks are not on my agenda, I'm afraid. Although I did get a lot of pressure yesterday to do it next year. So watch this space.
Yeah, I was going to ask, why didn't you take part? But it sounds like you might be signed up for the next one.
Yeah, probably.
This podcast, we like to find out a bit about you. So if we go back to the very beginning, doing my research beforehand, you grew up sort of on a London council estate, is what I understand. What was that like?
I had a really good upbringing. So my parents and family all hailed from New Cross and Peckham in southeast London, and then we moved to Lewisham when I was 3 on what was a very typical London council estate. And my parents were brilliant. They're still with us. And we're a very close family, very small family, but very close family. And it was a good upbringing. I think we had deprivation. I didn't have very much growing up materially, but I did have a really supportive and quite emotional, loving upbringing, which I think has made me the person that I am today. And we're still very close. My parents have actually moved down to Hampshire. So I don't know what it was like because I don't have anything else to compare it to, but it was a very, very nice up. I mean, I noticed from a very early age how there were the haves and the have-nots, even on my estate. And, a bit like Only Fools and Horses, we had the people that lived on the estate like that, where there'd be chancellors and selling things down Catford Market. But it was a great place to grow up, and it formed the person that I am today. Yeah,
Talking of sort of when you were younger, going to school and things like that, what sort of character were you in the school playground back in the day?
really shy, really, really shy, and would get incredibly worked up about the fact that I had homework that I didn't understand, or kind of shy talking to people. But the way I got out of trouble, I was kind of, you had the really popular kids at school, at secondary and primary school, and then the really unpopular kids, or the kids that were picked on. Never really bullied. Could have been, I suspect, but the way I got out of trouble was by making people laugh. And cracking a joke. So I had a really good group of friends at school, at primary school in particular, but kind of just blended in the middle. There was nothing really special about me, quite frankly. But that kept me out of trouble, and I had quite a good small group of friends. When I got to secondary school, my confidence grew a bit. And when I was at university, that's really when I started to become less shy, but incredibly shy and incredibly reticent. My teachers would regularly comment to my parents that I chatted a lot in class, but I was very quiet outside of it. So I think I just blended in, really.
You mentioned there telling jokes and I guess making people laugh. Is that something that stayed with you? And I'm wary that if your answer is yes, I might have to ask you for a joke.
Yeah, it wasn't really jokes. You know what I mean? So I still do. I mean, I love talking to people, and I remember my dad saying to me, I can't believe you kind of turned into this person. But what I mean by making people laugh is like if it looked like one of the bullies was going to come up and do something, I would kind of get out of it by chatting and being self-deprecating, and it kind of nullified their reason why they might start on you or pick on you. So it was that kind of humor, really, kind of dry sense of humor, self-deprecation. The self-deprecation has really stayed with me because I find it's the best way to break the ice with somebody, whether you're talking one-on-one in a social situation or whether you're going in front of a room to talk about a really serious issue or doing a speech or something. The self-deprecation, I think, gets people on your side. I'm letting you into all my secrets. But yeah, no, I suppose it's always kind of got me out of trouble and made people warm to me, which I think is quite important.
Is that something, I mean, and maybe you're jumping ahead a bit, and I'll probably jump back in a little bit, but you talked about that sort of easing the tension with the self-deprecating humor. Is that something that's proved useful in politics? I mean, looking at when you joined the political arena, it's been an interesting, few years, to say the least.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from different audiences, like I get into trouble sometimes from the people behind me talking to the cashier in the Sainsbury's and 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 uh, and bits like that. So yeah, the self-deprecation does get you out of trouble, but it also, because of the quite fiery politics that we've had, certainly in my terms, like my 1.5 terms, just showing people that you're slightly normal and you don't have these delusions of grandeur, which unfortunately is an affliction that many of my colleagues have on both sides of the aisle, and showing that you can understand and you can have a decent chat down the pub or over a pint, I think serves you quite well. So, and I think the self deprecation thing is quite a natural thing with me anyway. I'm not flashy. Um, I'm governed by the reasons why I originally went into the job. So I think people can see that's quite a natural thing.
Why did you first go into the job? That's quite a nice segue.
Yeah, frustration really, and I think I probably had a chip on my shoulder. So I grew up, as you've outlined, on the council estate, and one of the things I really noticed was that my parents would work all the hours God sent, and I'd always get the material things like 6 months after everyone else would get. And I started to know, and I never went without, and I'm not a materialistic person, but you notice you didn't get your new show my age, but we read classics if you wanted, or PlayStation instead of a Sega Mega Drive. But all my friends were, and their parents didn't work. And it was during the kind of midless period of the Tony Blair government, and it started to really get on my nerve. And then my MP, it was a lady, this was in secondary school, a lady called Jackie Lay, she was the Conservative MP for Beckenham, came in, and as I said to you, I was quite a shy child, and she came and spoke to us, and I put up my hand, and Mr. Malik was the teacher, said, "Yeah, Paul, what do you want to ask?" And I said, "I don't quite," I said something like, "I don't understand why you're here talking to us. I could do a better job than you." And my teacher kind of looked absolutely astounded. And she said, "Well, if you think that's the case, why don't you come out with me at the weekend and see what I actually do?" So I did. And I was starting to formulate a bit of an interest in politics. It was around the time that Ian Duncan Smith was being thrown out. And I went out with Jackie, and she really taught me a lot and honed me a lot. And I decided the Conservative Party was the kind of way in which I wanted to go. But it was completely by chance and completely someone took a chance on me really and said, "Come out." I mean, she could have very easily gone, "What an og," and gone home, but she didn't. And we actually spoke a couple of months ago, but because she gave me the chance, that's how I got into it. I was about 14, 15 at the time.
Talking there about sort of when you were younger. I wonder if some of the stuff that you saw and the views that you had when you were younger, and the childhood that you had, has influenced any of the views that you hold to this day.
Without a doubt. If I said to you family values, I think that's a tagline that's become quite toxified. It's been taken over by a certain section of political discourse now. I don't mean the kind of marriage only and, no sex until marriage and no, children for gay people or anything like that. It's not what I mean by family values. But the kind of very early on, my mum and dad said to me, "You can achieve all you want in life." And I didn't have much to grow up with, but I had their support. I went to a really rubbish secondary school. I think it was the worst in the borough. But I worked, and I worked for what I got, and I got through university, and I got through school. Quite a struggle because I don't think I was particularly intellectually gifted, but I was a worker, and that kind of drove me, and that is kind of, so I suppose I always had small c conservative values, and then when I got into secondary school, and that kind of, what I said to you about me getting angry when I was at primary school, I think probably threw me into the Conservative Party because I didn't like what Tony Blair was, for example, doing on welfare that I saw when I was younger, and actually I believe trapping people into poverty. So I think that's probably why I ended up, and absolutely the reason why I joined the Tory party was because my the way my parents brought me up and also what I saw growing up on that council estate.
Were your parents involved in politics or interested in politics? Was that a discussion that you had at home, or did that come completely to the side?
It was a real shock to them, and they've never been particularly political. My dad was a business development manager, so kind of a road salesman for a frozen food wholesaler, and my mum didn't work for the first 4 years of my life, and then we had to go to work. Didn't really talk about politics, but might speak about small p political stuff on the news. We always watched the news, and they started to think I was a bit of a weird young person because I was probably 11 or 12, and I started watching Question Time. And then I started to formulate opinions, and then I started to try and talk to them. And my dad, I think, is the equivalent of a black cab driver. Didn't have a particularly great education, left school at 15, but worked all his life. But everything that he says about politics and his view always either ends up being true or the majority view of what people think. And so he would always give me his opinion on what we'd have vehement disagreements, but no, never really political. They've become a lot more political now. When I said to them I want to go into politics, they were like, yeah, yeah, okay. But actually, when I was about 15, 16, the Conservative Party had its spring forum in Brighton. And the first time I really remember speaking to my dad about it was couldn't really afford to get a ticket, and we lived in London. And he phoned up central office and got a ticket for me for 20 quid and drove me down to Spring Forum, and waited for me all day until I came out and spoke about it on the way home. And if he hadn't have done that, I probably wouldn't have been driven on to go and do more and more things. So no, never really spoke about it, but now we speak about it all the time. And they still think I'm a real weird individual for going into it, actually.
Do you agree on politics, or do they have diverging views? When you said, like, "I wanna be, like, a conservative," were they like, "Yep, totally agree, 1,000,000% makes sense," or were they like, "What are you doing?"
It's really funny. I've never really asked them how they used to vote because I suspect my mum probably missed a few, and my dad probably missed a few, but they always vote Conservative now, of course. But I think they were probably floating voters. I remember one of the things when I was growing up that my dad said to me was he did not like how strong the unionized workforces were with the trade unions. And my dad's nearly 80. So he saw a lot of unionized workforces and he didn't like the tactics of unions. So I think he's probably always been a floating voter, but would have liked and did like what Margaret Thatcher stood for. Probably voted for Blair, and I think they did vote for Blair in the first couple. So they're kind of the traditional floating voters. If they feel better, then they'll vote for the government. If they feel worse, they'll go elsewhere. But no doubt, my background, my dad's mum, my dad's mum and dad, grandfather and grandmother, they were absolute Labour voters. My mum's father, who I only met a couple of times, he was definitely an old socialist. So my family's upbringing would have been Labour politics, massively Labour politics.
We've talked a bit about your childhood and growing up and your relationship with your parents. I wonder about your sort of working life, like, what was your first job?
My first job, so I had a paper round, a news shopper, which I used to do every Wednesday after school. I think I got paid about 13 quid a week for that. And my first job was M&S. I worked in Marks and Spencer's. So when was 16, 17, I went out and worked at Marks and Spencer's in Bromley. And they were really good because I was earning £6.24 an hour, and I had 20% off for M&S. That was like the kid in the candy shop, and they kept me on all through university and then go on holidays. But yeah, it was menswear M&S, which was good. I worked with my dad for a bit, did cold store stuff, then went into back into M&S food. So yeah, it was Marks and Spencer's. And then I'm trying to think. No, it was Marks and Spencer's all the way through. I was really lucky with them because they did a really good Christmas temp scheme. But I think I did 16 hours a week at £6.24, and all my friends were earning about 480,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was getting £500 a month. I felt like the richest person in the world, and actually at that time I was. And yeah, it's brilliant, really good. That was my first job.
Could you give the 20% discount to your friends and family, or what was
My
that?
mum loved it. My mum absolutely loved it. Christmas, getting, the M&S food. And actually, one of the things I never really told her is we had a staff shop, and it would be they would be upstairs. And I remember I got her a blue kind of suede jacket, which sounds absolutely hideous now, but it was quite smart at the time. And it was 179 quid. and it was up for £4 in the staff shop. So I got it, kept the £179 price tag on, and took the £4 off. And I never told her it was actually £4. But it was a great place to work, and my mum absolutely loved the staff discount. She was a bit annoyed that I went to university because you couldn't use it.
Does your mum listen to podcasts? Because I'm aware you might have accidentally outed yourself there a little bit.
Oh, well, she won't mind now. She'll forgive me anything, everything. Yeah, she does actually. She listens much more to the radio.
Mhm.
I mean, I never used to listen to podcasts. And only very recently I kind of got interested in them. So I listened to the George Osborne and Ed Balls one. I don't really listen to Alistair Cameron. And then I listened to some funny ones like Help I Sexted My Boss on the train up from Hampshire when I come into work. But that's how I found you. So I've started following a bit more podcasts, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to jump at the chance to be on one, I think.
Oh, that's good timing. I did well there. I'll take
The
that.
post.
You talked a few times about your time studying. What did you study?
Politics and international relations. So I did business studies, history, English literature at A level, and then I did politics and international relations. I think that was probably a mistake because one of the things I now say to younger people about not being a career politician absolutely is not practicing what you preached. Because I think I am, and that I'm a bit not ashamed, but I am a bit ashamed of that because I should have gone and done something else. But actually, university, I don't think was the right thing for me in hindsight. But I had a lot of pressure from me at school to go at the time because the 50% quotas had just come out. Well, Blair wanted everyone to go at 50%. So, yeah, I did politics and international relations. Did it really help me? Probably not, but I made some great friends there who I now know in politics.
You also, I understand, worked in the sort of local government area. I wonder what that's like, and how does that compare to working in an MP capacity? Is there a stark difference?
Yes and no. So there's a number of differences. The fundamentals are the same, but the differences are speed of delivery and actually ground level politics. So I became a councillor when I was 19, no 18 by mistake. So I was a paper candidate in a council estate in Southampton and won by 50 votes. So I stayed and served out my term. The difference between national politics is I ended up being lead member for children's services and education. And I used to have MPs come and see me about getting a few million quid to rebuild a school when it was the days before academies. Whereas now I go and see councillors to try and do something for my constituents on a ground level. So my ability to deliver and that speed of delivery was a lot quicker than it is now. I'm still working in my constituency on some things that I was trying to promise 6 years ago. But the fundamentals of being elected, serving the people that elected you, casework, making sure you go back to them and sending a message and selling a message, they are fundamentally similar. And I say to anybody going into politics who wants to be an MP, you should absolutely be a councillor first because it's the best crash course that you get in representing people.
And you just mentioned you were super young when you were a councillor in the first instance. What's that like? Because I imagine most people in politics are of a certain age or above. Like, what's it like being that young and being involved on the sort of council level, people coming to you with their issues?
Yeah, as I say, it was a mistake. There was an old Labour councillor, proper socialist councillor, and I get on really well with proper old socialists because they stand for something, and actually are very decent people. Called Dennis Harriman, I think he's died. I think he's passed now, and he was mayor. And Southampton Test Conservative Association weren't really the most members, shall we say? And so when I was at university, I just said I'd like to stand for some experience. And I got elected by 51 votes. And actually, the young element, I think, was a great thing. I never had a bad reaction from somebody on the doorstep knocking in Redbridge. Me and a friend called Ben stood in neighbouring wards. He was also at university. They actually loved it. And so when I get young people standing or coming to me to get involved in politics, I don't think that should be a thing that they're embarrassed by. For example, the guy that leads, I can't remember what council it is, but the reform guy was just in
Yeah.
the David Brent skit. Can't remember his name. He, there were a couple of my colleagues that I thought weren't as generous as they should have been to him because despite the fact he's 18 or 19, he was elected. People obviously thought he was fine at his job and they may think he's doing a good job now. I don't know. But judge people on their output, not on their age. And that's something I say to young people. So it was a really good thing. No, I've never had a bad reaction. I'm not old. Then it was a refreshing thing, and indeed that year, we won 13 of the 15 seats or 11 of the 10 seats. It was 20 years ago, and 5 of us were under 20. So actually, the council did great radical things because we were young and not really kind of the vested interests that just keep the old system going.
Mhm. Obviously, talking about your time working in a council capacity, when did it go from working within that council environment to wanting to get involved in sort of the national political arena?
I mean, I've been very lucky. I mean, I decided very early on, probably too young, so 14, 15, that I wanted to be an MP because if we go back to when I was talking about when Jackie Leigh got me involved, I came into Parliament and I watched, I don't know if you've seen it, but the new Tony Blair documentary on Channel 4, where he says he was going to be a lawyer and he went into Parliament when he was young and he said, I have to be here. It felt like there was this almost spiritual connection to the building. That absolutely happened to me. So I walked into central lobby and just saw immediately I was at home at 14 or 15. This is where I have to be. I like it. And there was something very, very odd about that feeling that you got. So I decided pretty early on that I wanted to do it. I didn't think it was going to be as quickly as it was. But serving as a councillor, as I say, kind of helped. I got very close to a general election campaign with a friend of mine at the time who was the parliamentary candidate, so that gave me some experience. And then I did pretty much what any young Tory does, which is become a parliamentary researcher. So I think by that stage, I decided, right, Paul, you've got to go out and get a proper job and then come back and do it. But I was very lucky because the opportunities presented themselves and therefore I did it a bit earlier, which is I'm not ashamed of, but I wish I had done it differently.
If you hadn't gone to become an MP, if you hadn't got involved in politics, is there another route you think you would have gone down, or another career that you would have explored?
It's a good question because I've been asked, but, when I go and visit schools, "What did you wanna be when you grow up?" "When I wanted to be a train driver, a chef, and a pilot." I'd have probably, to be honest with you, ended up in the same job that my father did, sales. I never felt I had a natural affinity with sales, but then when I was at university, I went off and became a field sales manager like my father was, and actually was quite good at it. And so I'd probably have gone into that, or I was actually asked to do the graduate scheme for M&S management. I'd have probably ended up in that, frankly, because they're all the same kind of skill set. Sales is patcher, isn't it? And so I would have probably ended up doing that. But as I say, I was very lucky and kind of every stage in my career fell into the next level of politics, really.
When you get elected for the first time, I wonder what that sort of feeling is when you're going through that sort of long process of standing to be elected as an MP finally. And I understand maybe you lost an election previously and then you won one. So I wonder what the difference is. Oh, you lost two.
Do
Just in my research. I wonder what the feeling is like to lose an election and then going forward, what it's like to win an election. That the different sort of feelings that you have at that point.
Yeah, it's really hard to describe. So I stood in 2015 in Mitcham Ward, which we were never going to win. But I'll defy any candidate to say that they don't think for at least 30 seconds during a general election campaign that they might win. I remember that. I was disappointed that we didn't win, but I was sent to help somewhere else. So that was a good thing. I do think, I always say to younger people, you have to experience losing before you win. Otherwise, you end up being a very, very different politician, I think. So after Mitcham and Morden, I then went into a marginal seat, which was a national Conservative target seat called Southampton Test, where I was a councillor 5 years before, and it was a majority of 2,500, and it was one that we needed to get. And that was entirely different because for about 6 weeks, we had the Prime Minister down twice, we had every cabinet minister down, 300 activists, we knocked 80,000 doors, and I gave up my job and went and did that full time, which is very unlike me because, going back to that kind of shy, not being able really to make a decision when it comes to your personal life, still was there. That was the worst feeling in the world when I lost that, uh, because you work so hard for something and you are part of the national campaign. That probably, I have to say, probably took me a year or so to get over because you literally, once you've declared, that's it. The people have gone, they've got to go back to work. People out there don't care about the fact you lost the election. That really did bother me, and it affected me deeply, and I started to question what I was gonna do, really. Uh, the time I won in Eastleigh in 2019, everything is in slow motion. So, I'll give you a secret, you probably heard this from some of your other guests, who do the same. Candidates don't go to the count until they get called to see which way it's going. Uh, and I think that's partly for your mental health, but also your campaign team's mental health when you've got a rampaging ex-candidate or ex-MP on the stage. But everything went into slow motion. I remember walking into the hall and they were putting the votes in thousands, bundles of 1,000, and mine was at 32,000. And thinking, I'm not gonna swear, but thinking, "Wow," and going in, and then they read out the result, and, as a political anorak and enthusiast, when you watch declarations, you suddenly hear your it's all slow motion. I didn't hear a word of my declaration. I just remember being clapped at and cheered, and then going into saying some comments, and then going and having a few beers with my mates because 'cause we'd won, and getting handed this brown envelope that says Member of Parliament on it with the arrangements of what you should be doing on Monday. So that you spend years getting there, but you never remember when you got in. It's really weird. The second time in 2024, you do remember that that was an overwhelming sense of relief at the fact that we'd survived the cull, and I always call it the cull of Tory MPs, and just absolute on both occasions, absolute unwavering gratitude to the people that put you there. Every cross you see on a ballot paper, you think about the person that had made an active decision to vote for you, and perhaps they're voting for us, but it's just a romanticism that I think candidates go through. So relief and just gratitude, I think.
You mentioned a few times a degree of shyness. I wonder how that fits in with such a public facing role, both in terms of council and as an MP as well.
I think it's probably harmed me because it is still there, believe it or not, it is there. So if I'm about to do a big public meeting, strangely, it's really weird and this is going to sound really arrogant, and people who know me know that I'm not arrogant. If I stand up in the chamber and make a speech, I no longer get very nervous about that. And I think that's where I said to you earlier, the 14, 15-year-old was going, I have to be in here. If I'm going out and doing a surgery or have to go, for example, the 10K yesterday in Netley that I opened, arriving and trying to talk to people, I kind of have to give myself a bit of a pep talk in the car. 'Cause you go, right, come on, you got to do this. And then you have the brain, the voicing again. But what about if they don't like you? Well, that doesn't matter. It's politics. Of course, some people aren't going to like you. So it's not a persona, but it kind of you kind of pump yourself up. And and when I say to you, I think it's harmed me. There are a lot of my colleagues when we're in government and now that we're in opposition who are much more sharp elbowed than I am and are absolutely comfortable about formulating a narrative for themselves to get known nationally. Well, I've never been good at that. I've always been, probably goes back to my shyness. I got elected as a councillor with one of my best mates, Ben Walker. I always thought he'd be the MP and I'd be the number two. I've always thought I'm a good number two behind the scenes, which is why I was a special advisor and an advisor to people. And I've never really thought I was the number one, and a lot of my colleagues do. And I think that probably has harmed me in my progress and is likely to harm me in my progress going forward. So if Kemi's watching this, I hope she takes that into account.
I wonder, you talked about when you were a teenager walking into Westminster and the feeling that you sort of belonged and you wanted to be there. What's the feeling like when you finally get elected as an MP and you're walking in and now this is sort of your place of work?
Uh, This is going to sound awful because genuinely I wanted to do it for a long time. I just thought I was going home. And that sounds awful and it sounds arrogant and so entitled. And for a boy like me to be sitting here, I still, I'm very grateful and still walk around the building and go, wow. But it was like, oh, well, I've wanted this long time and now I'm sitting on this green bench and, I'm about to do my maiden. So I thought I was home. Really, really enjoyed it and actually made the best thing about when I walked in as the MP is meeting a doorkeeper called Joe, took me on a tour. And I have an old line to them because they always insist on calling you sir and Mr. Holmes. I never want to be called Mr. Holmes because my dad's called Mr. Holmes. I'm just Paul, and that makes them laugh. But just the overwhelming sense of teamwork and camaraderie when there were 9 of us elected in 2019, and making some lifelong friendships because of this drive and determination. But actually, in terms of being in the building and doing my job, I had a job to do. I thought I was coming home, and I thought I better bloody well get on with it as quickly as possible.
Is there anything that surprised you about it, either process-wise or actually maybe even, the building itself? I hear it's not in the best shape.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me about it was the fact that actually it is not particularly glamorous in here, and if you look at some of the ways in which MPs are treated or what they work in other countries, particularly the United States, and then you bring some guests here who may be foreign MPs, they quite often say, "Wow, is this it?" Because it's falling to bits, and I think the thing that really surprised me was the sharp elbows, as I've mentioned. Mm, and the other thing is the length of time it takes to get anything done. I think, if one of my constituents comes up to me and says, "You haven't done this," or "Why is this taking so long?" I think that's one of the things that's really stuck with me is the kind of stagnation of the state to make change. And we're in one of these great debates now about Andy Burnham running on rewiring the state. Kemi Badenoch quite rightly saying we need to discover how to rewire the state to deliver for people. I think the really frustrating and annoying thing that I find is that actually the being able to deliver what you say is of bureaucracy or because of a public organisation not doing what they say they're going to do. I think is the most frustrating thing for me.
Looking at some of the work you've done in Parliament and the different roles that you've had, you've worked
Mm.
with, I guess, what some people would call big beasts within the Conservative Party, both historically and presently. I wondered, if you had a particular favourite or if there's anything interesting from your time working with some of them so-called big beasts?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so I resigned from government, you'll recall, from Boris's government as the Home Secretary's PPS, but Pretty is a formidable woman, and she was very open and showing me what I think my favourite role is probably I still am an opposition whip, but being a government whip. Uh, the kind of true workhorses of the government to get things done, to get parliamentary agendas through. One of the things that colleagues don't or the public don't know is that whips are ministers. So if we're allocated a department, it's the only position in parliament or in the government where you really get to see what's going on across every government department when we met. But my best for enjoyment was probably David Cameron. I was David Cameron's parliamentary bag carrier as foreign secretary, and he is somebody that made me want to join the Conservative Party as a 16-year-old. I always was quite terrified of him because there's a huge class difference, and just watching him in a room. We went to Washington together when Trump had come in, and we were meeting on the Hill with people. Just watching the brain power of the man, I think, was probably one of the things that stuck out the most. And having the privilege of working with, I think, just like, wow, this guy is just something in his own league, really.
One of the things I'm always asking guests, I mean, it's still early days in the podcast, but I've asked the guests we've had so far, is about working cross-party and working with people across the different floors. I wondered if there's anything that surprised you about working collaboratively with others, and if there's anyone on the other side of the fence, whatever fence that is now, that you maybe have grown a friendship with or you've worked closely with that has sort of stuck with you.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to work collaboratively in here. And actually, one of the things that I've very early on made clear, and it's been fed back to me that some of the other side like me for this, is in the chamber I can be an absolute bugger, and we will disagree and disagree, and but it's never personal for me. There are quite a few times I've intervened on somebody on the Labour side and actually been really tough on them, and then go outside and we'll see them and say, "Hello, love, can I buy you a drink?" And they go, No, no, I'm sorry about that." So yeah, well, you do have to work collaboratively. I mean, I've got some really good friends in the Labour Party. So one of my great friends is Satya Kaur in Southampton Test. We got on really well. Darren Paffey is my next door neighbour. We've been working quite hard together on maritime stuff, maritime strategies. Chris Curtis, Adam Jogi. In fact, I'd go as far as to say, because I lost a lot of my friends in the Conservative Party at the 24 election. I mean, there used to be a big table of about 15 of us that used to hang around together in the 19 to 24 Parliament. The only two that were left were me and Stuart Andrew, the MP for Daventry, was Pudsey there. A lot of my friends are on the opposition parties. So, yeah, Adam Jogi. The one that really sticks out to me is Naz Shah. She did the seconding of the humble address last week. She proposed the humble address last week, had a terrible upbringing, and we are diametrically opposed on many of our views on foreign affairs. But she is a great woman, and she's a very, very close friend of mine. I don't really have many friends in the Liberal Democrats. I have to say, I've spent my career in the last 6 years kind of fighting them, and they do keep themselves to themselves, Liberal Democrats. Apart from, I have to say, a really good friend is Ed Morello, who's South Dorset, who if you saw him walking around here, you would just expect him to be a Conservative. Not that that matters to me, but you probably would think he was. And we met when he let me stand under his umbrella when we were having a fag on the terrace when he first got in. And we've become great friends, and we always text each other over the recess. So it is a place of collaboration. The chamber is quite a lot of theatre, but I don't judge people. I judge people on actions rather than on their political background. And I have to say, behind the scenes, we all respect each other, and that's the nice thing about this place.
You talked about Nashar and the King's Speech. I wonder what that's sort of like to be a part of, what that sort of pageantry and ceremony, what that's all sort of like.
I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's utterly bizarre, and it, you kind of think to yourself, should we be doing it now? But I'm a huge patriot and a huge monarchist. I love our constitutional monarchy. I adore the king, particularly the late queen. So when you watch these things as a kid, these pomp and these pomp ceremonies that happen as a kid, and then you yourself get summoned up to go and see His Majesty to deliver a speech. You just think, what the hell am I doing here? That's just the one thing that goes in your head. I think there is still a bit of me that has a bit of imposter syndrome, and it you watch it and you're there and you do remember it. I really wish I'd written a diary. I started a diary when I got elected and never carried it on. And it's amazing how quickly you forget about things. But things like last Wednesday, it's a mixture of disbelief, admiration, particularly for someone like Naz to make a speech like she did with the subjects that she was talking about, and just constantly going, "Wow, I'm still here." Quite frankly, that's the thing that you get, and I think that's just me. My personality is I'm not quite sure if I ever should have got in, but make the most of it. And I think that's just because I'm slightly neurotic and slightly insecure, probably. But just make sure you use that to work hard for the people that put you here. Really, I think.
On that note, I wonder, knowing what you know now, both maybe in terms of politics, but also in terms of life, is there any bit of advice that you would give younger Paul looking back?
I think what I say to younger people, and I probably should have said to myself, was you absolutely deserve to get there. I mean, the, never ask, my dad used to say to me as a kid, never ask somebody to do what that you're not willing to do yourself.
Uh,
And I think that stuck with me. But also to younger people, don't let anybody tell you you can't get there. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not right for the role. Or, I mean, I remember I met my old English teacher, Tony Illingworth, he's 70s now. I brought him in for lunch because he did a lot for me when I was at school, bringing out that confidence and helping me. He said, "A lot of your teachers at school never thought you'd get there." I made it very clear that I wanted to go, but never thought you'd get there. They used to laugh about the fact no one from here gets into politics. And he said, and he said to me, I took great delight in telling them that they were wrong. I think I should have told myself when I was younger that I wasn't wrong, that you can do it, and probably be slightly less single-minded in the ambition to get here, I think. So yeah, a bit of self-reflection is probably needed after that question when I think about that later on.
a bit more about you, because we talked a bit about sort of politics and your life growing up. I wonder, looking at you now, what would your oldest friends describe you as?
Loyal, funny, and caring. I think probably it sounds really bizarre, but sometimes so caring and so willing to help that you actually forget about yourself sometimes. My older friends are very understanding that I see them a lot less than I used to just because the working hours in here going down and now focusing on what is now a marginal seat, try and get re-elected. But I think loyalty and kindness are the greatest greatest under recognized traits in somebody, and they're what I look out for people. But I think that's probably how people would describe me.
Outside of your work, you talked about being busier than you were previously. What do you do in that downtime when you have free time? What are you up to?
I spend a lot of time with my family. I've got a young nephew who's in Cornwall, so it's about 4 hours from me with my younger sister. My older sister is in London still, married, and my parents have moved about 20 miles away, 20 minutes away. I spend a hell of a lot. If I've got downtime, I obviously see my friends, usually in a pub. I adore a country pub. I adore Real Ale. So I like doing that. Just allows me to decompress. Uh, Seeing my family, but one of the things that really does make me decompress is me and my friend Jerry have a very small speedboat, and we have the Hamble River in my constituency, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful rivers in the world. And we try and get that in and then go and spend the day. That truly is kind of the only, I mean, we're not very good at it, but it is really kind of the only way that I can be being out there on the water, particularly in the sun, and just chilling is how I recover. Um, and that's what I like doing. And then it's probably back to the pub afterwards. There's probably a common denominator.
You talked about you talked previously about being shy and also, like, I guess, putting on a persona almost when you have to speak
Yeah.
publicly. I wonder, is that the sort of main difference between yourself on a personal level and yourself in a sort of work capacity?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm incredibly quiet in my personal life. You know, some of my friends, my friend Jerry, I just mentioned, I have the boat with. If I'm in the car or I'm in his company, I probably won't speak for a couple of hours. But it's not false because you're so comfortable with each other that actually not speaking doesn't mean anything's off. It's if I was speaking a lot, you'd know, okay, what's up? But yeah, very quiet. And you're right to say a persona, but the ingredients of that persona are still genuinely me, but you just have to amp it up a little bit. But I can be incredibly silly at times and, great, and have a laugh with people and let yourself go. So there's not too much that's dissimilar between my private and personal stuff. But I think in my personal life, I'm just a bit more reticent and relaxed because you're resting and you feel comfortable around people. So you just relax and become a bit quieter and a bit more introverted, I think.
I'm aware that I've taken up a decent amount of your
It's all right.
time, so I wondered, just as a sort of final question,
Mm.
I like to end in a quick fire round, which we'll come to, but what keeps you motivated?
My constituents, my family, and the country in my work life. But my happiness and my family's happiness is what motivates me on a personal level, and my friends' happiness. I would drop everything if a friend had a problem and they said, "I need your help," I would be there within 2 minutes. So that's loyalty, as I said. It's a big thing that goes through my life. But in terms of my professional life, my constituents. That's plain and simple because you're not here if you don't keep them happy.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to run through a quick
Yeah,
fire round.
I
I'm going to
like
ad
it.
lib a little bit at the start by asking you, what's your favourite pint?
My favourite pint, probably a pint of Timothy Taylor's or Flower Pot's Bitter.
Fantastic. And the next one is tea or coffee?
Coffee, no tea.
No tea. Are you an early riser or a night owl?
Night owl.
Favourite way to unwind?
Boating.
Uh, Football, rugby, or neither?
Football.
One word that colleagues would use to describe you.
Determined.
Favourite comfort food?
Ooh, probably a sausage roll.
Sausage roll.
Yeah, or lasagna. No, actually lasagna. Lasagna.
I'm going to start a tally chart of the different answers I get on that one. Most underrated thing about the area you represent?
The beautiful River Hamble and the quality of its people.
Fantastic. Are you a podcast listener or are you a streamer?
Podcast listener.
Cool. And your ideal Sunday?
A Sunday roast, a pint of bitter at the local pub, and then a nap.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you very much for joining me on the Personality Politics podcast. It's been great having you.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks very much for your time.
My thanks to Paul Holmes for joining me for today's conversation. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Personality Politics podcast, you can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. If there's a politician you'd like to hear from in a future episode, do let us know on social media. Thanks for listening.